Welcome to the Deep Dive, brought to you today by RWG Publishing. In a world just overflowing with information, sometimes what you really need is a clear, concise shortcut to essential knowledge.
Right.
And that's exactly our mission today. We're diving deep into Know Your Rights, a citizen's guide to lawful encounters by Bill Vincent, pulling out the most powerful nuggets of insight to help you feel well-informed and confident.
I mean, think about it. Whether it's just a routine traffic stop, maybe a knock on your door, or even participating in a peaceful protest, interactions with law enforcement are, a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And those moments can often be confusing, maybe even a bit intimidating, but understanding your rights, what you are, and importantly, what you aren't obligated to do, that can really transform uncertainty into calm confidence.
Absolutely.
So this deep dive is all about equipping you with that fundamental legal awareness. Precisely.
Yeah.
And Bill Vincent's guide is incredibly thorough. It really covers the gamut: street encounters, police showing up at your door, ID requirements, searches, arrests, even those special situations like protests or interactions that happen in schools.
Wow.
What's really compelling about this book, I think, is its empowering focus. Knowledge isn't just power here. It's genuinely your best defense.
The foundation why knowing your rights matters.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. The guide really hammers home that every citizen has rights, guaranteed by the Constitution. But what happens when we aren't fully aware of them? How does that lack of awareness really impact us day to day?
Well, it creates unnecessary vulnerability.
Yeah.
It really does. For instance, a lot of people mistakenly believe they have to consent to a search or they have to show ID in basically any police encounter.
Right, that seems common.
But it isn't always true. Police often ask for consent precisely because they don't have the legal standard, like probable cause. Your consent legally bypasses that higher hurdle for them. So unknowingly giving that consent means you've essentially waived a fundamental protection. You've given it up.
And it's not just about avoiding legal trouble, right? There's a big psychological piece, too.
Definitely.
Knowing your rights lets you assert them calmly, respectfully. It can stop that sort of spiral of panic, that feeling like things are escalating beyond your control.
Absolutely. That confidence is just invaluable. It
Yeah.
shifts the whole dynamic from feeling, overwhelmed to being an informed participant in what's happening.
Okay, so let's tackle a big myth right away. Police can stop and search anyone without reason. How does Bill Vincent's guide push back on that?
Yeah, that's a critical misconception. The guide makes it crystal clear.
Yeah.
Officers need either your voluntary consent or they need probable cause for a search.
And probable cause is a high bar.
It's a high legal standard, yes. It means they need specific facts or evidence that would lead a reasonable person to believe a crime has been committed or is, actively happening. If neither of those conditions, consent or probable cause, is present, you have every right to refuse a search.
And the book gives you the words to use.
Exactly. It provides the precise language to assert that right clearly.
So for you, our listener, this deep dive is really designed to distill these kinds of distinctions, giving you clear, practical advice on handling various encounters, focusing on how to assert your rights respectfully and, importantly, safely.
Encounters on the street, navigating common situations.
Okay, let's start with a scenario many of us probably dread: a traffic stop. Seeing those flashing lights in the rearview mirror, it can make anyone's heart race.
Oh, yeah.
What's the guide's main advice for that initial moment?
Right. First step is just pull over safely and calmly. Keep your hands visible, usually on the steering wheel is best. Leave your seatbelt on, roll down your window. These simple actions can immediately help de-escalate tension and signal you're cooperating.
Okay, simple steps. And once the officer walks up, how should you communicate? Like, what if they ask that classic question, do you know how fast you are going?
The guide really emphasizes being polite, but also brief. For that specific question, a simple, "I'm not sure, officer," or even just polite silence is totally acceptable.
You don't have to guess or admit anything?
No. The Fifth Amendment protects you from self-incrimination. That means you don't have to answer questions beyond providing the essentials: your identification, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. Anything else you say can potentially be used against you.
So how do you handle something like declining a request to search your vehicle? How do you do that politely without seeming, uncooperative or like you have something to hide?
A clear, calm statement is really your strongest tool. Just say, "Officer, I do not consent to a search."
That's it.
That's it. It's not an admission of guilt. It's simply asserting your Fourth Amendment right. And importantly, even if they decide they do have probable cause and search anyway, your refusal is now on record. It protects your legal standing if you challenge that search later.
That makes sense.
And always remember to ask, am I free to go? If the answer is yes, you can leave. If it's no, they need a legal reason to keep detaining you.
That phrase, am I free to go, feels like a really powerful tool for clarifying exactly where you stand.
It really is.
What about recording these interactions? Is that generally okay to do?
In many places, yes. You generally have a legal right to record interactions with law enforcement, as long as you're not physically interfering with their duties. The guide suggests maybe informing the officer, something like, "Officer, just letting you know I'm going to record this interaction for my records."
Okay.
It's definitely smart to be aware of your specific state's laws on recording, but generally, yeah, recording can be a vital piece of documentation for your own protection.
Okay, moving beyond the car then. Do you always have to show ID to police if you're just, say, walking around? This feels like a point of confusion for a lot of people.
Yeah, it really depends on your state and the specific situation. While drivers pretty much universally must show ID during a traffic stop, it gets more nuanced when you're outside a vehicle.
How so?
Some states have what are called stop and identify laws. In those states, you might have to provide identification if an officer has what's called reasonable suspicion that you're involved in criminal activity. Arizona, Nevada, Ohio are examples.
But not everywhere.
Right. In other states like California or New York, you generally aren't required to show ID unless you're actually driving or, they have probable cause to believe you've already committed a crime.
So again, asking that question, am I being detained or am I free to go? That seems crucial for figuring out your obligation.
Exactly. If you're not being detained, if you're free to leave, then you're generally not obligated to provide identification in those states.
Got it. Now, circling back to vehicle searches briefly, can police just search your car if they pull you over? What are the rules there?
No, not without specific justification. Police need either your consent or one of several established exceptions has to apply.
Okay, like what?
Well, like having probable cause, maybe they see something illegal in plain view. Or it could be a search done right after a lawful arrest. Or if they have reasonable suspicion, there's a weapon, and it's for officer safety. Or maybe it's an inventory search if your vehicle's being impounded.
So quite specific circumstances.
Yes. If none of those apply, they need your explicit consent to search.
And if they ask for that consent, what's the key phrase again?
I do not consent to a search. That remains your strongest protection. Just state it calmly. It legally preserves your Fourth Amendment rights if you end up needing to challenge the search down the road.
Okay. Now here's a concept that often sparks, well, a lot of debate. Stop and frisk. What's the actual legal basis for this, and what are its practical limits?
Right. So the legal standard for a stop and frisk comes from a big Supreme Court case back in 1968, Terry v. Ohio. It basically allows officers to briefly detain someone based on reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Now, that's a lower standard than probable cause.
Lower standard, okay.
And then they can perform a pat-down, which is the frisk, if they also have reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous.
So it's a two-part test, essentially. Reasonable suspicion of a crime and reasonable suspicion of being armed.
Exactly. Both have to be present for a lawful stop and frisk. And the limit is critical. A frisk is only supposed to be a pat-down of your outer clothing, specifically looking for weapons. It is not a full search.
They can't just start going through your pockets.
No. Not unless they feel something during that pat-down that is immediately recognizable as a weapon or clearly illegal contraband. That's sometimes called the plain field doctrine. And the stop itself, the detention, has to be temporary, brief.
So what's the best way to handle it if you find yourself in a stop and frisk situation? What's your demeanor supposed to be?
The advice is always, stay calm, be polite, be respectful. Do not physically resist, but you should clearly state, I do not consent to a search. Especially if they seem to be trying to go beyond just a simple pat-down for weapons.
And keep asking that question.
Yes, keep asking, am I free to go, to clarify your status. And crucially, even if you strongly believe your rights are being violated in that moment, don't run, don't resist physically. Address those violations later through proper legal channels. Resisting on the spot can lead to more charges.
We're really unpacking so many critical insights here, giving you actionable knowledge straight from Bill Vincent's guide. Look, to dive even deeper and empower yourself completely, you can find Know Your Rights, a citizen's guide to lawful encounters on Amazon. We've put the link right there in the deep dive description for you.
Police in your door and ID beyond the road.
Okay, moving from encounters out on the street, let's think about what happens when the police actually come to your home, knock on your door. what's the absolute first thing the guide advises you to ask them?
The essential first question always is, do you have a warrant?
Okay, straight up.
Yeah. And there are different kinds. There are search warrants, which allow them to look for specific evidence, but only in specific areas named in a warrant. There are arrest warrants, which are for a named individual, and that often allows entry into their home to make the arrest. And then there are things like bench warrants, usually for failing to show up in court.
And these warrants, they aren't just written up by the officers, right?
No, absolutely not. They need probable cause, they need a judge's signature, and they have to be very specific about what or who they're looking for and where they're allowed to look. You know, if a search warrant says they can search the garage, that doesn't automatically give them permission to search your bedroom without some other justification.
So let's say they don't have a warrant. What are your rights then regarding letting them into your home?
This is where the Fourth Amendment is really strong regarding your home. You have the absolute right to refuse entry if the police do not have a warrant, or what are called exigent circumstances, basically, an emergency situation.
And you should state that refusal clearly.
Yes. A clear, calm statement like, I do not consent to your entry is crucial. Your refusal is not an admission of guilt. The police will often ask for consent, even without a warrant, because they know if you say yes, you've just given them legal permission they didn't otherwise have.
So you're never obligated to consent?
Never. You're never obligated to consent to a search of your home without a warrant.
Okay, you mentioned exigent circumstances. What exactly falls under that category? When can police enter without a warrant or you're okay?
These are really about genuine emergencies. Things like imminent danger, maybe they hear screams or sounds of violence coming from inside, or if they have strong reason to believe evidence of a serious crime is actively being destroyed, like drugs being flushed down the toilet, or if they're in hot pursuit of a fleeing suspect who just ran into your home.
So pretty serious, immediate situations.
Right. And even in those situations, if you can, you should still verbally state that you do not consent to their entry. Then carefully observe everything they do, try to document details later, and definitely contact a lawyer afterward to review the legality of their entry and actions.
Okay. Circling back quickly to identification, let's just clarify again when and where you absolutely must show ID apart from driving.
Sure. So besides traffic stops for drivers, there are a few other mandatory situations, definitely at airports and security checkpoints, that's TSA regulations, usually in secure government buildings like courthouses or federal offices, and especially at border crossings.
Border crossings seem like a special case.
They really are. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, they have very broad authority. Refusing to show required ID there will almost certainly result in you being denied entry.
Okay. And when are you generally not required to show ID?
Well, like we touched on, if you're approached by police and it's just a consensual encounter, meaning you're genuinely free to walk away, you don't need to show ID in most states.
And at protests?
Generally, yes. Public protests are usually protected by the First Amendment. Police typically can't just demand ID from everyone there without a specific, valid reason related to suspected criminal activity.
So even in those stop and identify states?
Even in stop and identify states, while officers can usually ask for your name, they often can't force you to produce a physical ID card unless you're actually being arrested or detained for something specific, like a driving infraction. The key difference, again, is whether you're being lawfully detained or if it's just a consensual chat where you can leave.
The broader landscape, special situations, and defending your rights.
Let's broaden out a bit now and talk about protesting and free speech. The First Amendment gives pretty robust protection for peaceful assembly, doesn't it? I remember learning about cases like Tinker v. Des Moines.
Yeah, the student armbands case.
Right, affirming symbolic speech.
It's absolutely fundamental, and Tinker set that powerful standard. Students, as the court said, do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. But like most rights, there are limits.
What kind of limits?
Well, free speech doesn't protect things like inciting violence, making true threats against someone, or certain types of hate speech that cross legal lines. It also doesn't protect speech that directly violates public safety regulations.
And what about permits for big protests?
Right. Large, planned protests often require permits. These are usually what are called time, place, and manner restrictions. They're meant to manage public space and safety, like coordinating traffic, not to actually silence the message itself. Spontaneous protests usually don't require permits, but the key is always remaining peaceful.
So for protesters on the ground, what are the key rights to remember?
You have the right to assemble peacefully. You can use signs, chant, distribute leaflets, and critically, you generally have the right to record police interactions, again, as long as you're not physically interfering with what they're doing.
And if you are stopped or detained while protesting,
Yeah.
what's the drill?
Stay calm. State clearly, I am choosing to remain silent. Ask, am I free to leave? If an officer asks to search you or your belongings, politely but firmly say, I do not consent to a search. And try to document everything you can, who, what, when, where.
Okay. Now, shifting to a particularly sensitive area, schools and minors, it's always this unique environment, right? Balancing student rights with the school's need for safety and order.
It really is a balancing act.
How does the standard for searching students differ from searching adults outside of school?
The key difference comes from another Supreme Court case, New Jersey v. TLO. In schools, officials only need reasonable suspicion to conduct a search. That's a lower standard than the probable cause police need outside school grounds.
So it's easier to search a student.
Legally, yes, the threshold is lower. So lockers, for example, are often considered school property, meaning students have a lower expectation of privacy there. For personal things like backpacks, school officials still need that reasonable suspicion, but it's still a lower bar than probable cause.
What about phones? That seems like a big one now.
Phones are tricky. Courts are still figuring out the exact lines, but the general trend requires reasonable suspicion for a search. A case called Riley v. California, although about arrests, really highlighted the immense privacy interest people have in their phones, and that applies to students too, though the standard might still be reasonable suspicion in the school context.
And what if police get involved in questioning students? Say, a school resource officer, an SRO.
That's a crucial distinction. If actual police officers, including SROs acting in a law enforcement capacity, are involved in questioning a student about potential criminal activity, the student's rights align much more closely with adult Miranda rights.
Meaning?
Meaning the student has the right to remain silent and the right to request a parent or an attorney be present during questioning. Parents should absolutely insist on being present if the police want to question their child at school.
This brings us to a difficult but really vital topic, racial profiling. The guide points out how certain practices like stop and frisk historically, or even old loitering laws, have disproportionately impacted people of color.
Yes, unfortunately, this is a well-documented reality. There have been major court cases, like Floyd v. City of New York, which found that the NYPD's stop and frisk practices at that time were unconstitutional, specifically because they disproportionately targeted Black and Latino individuals without adequate justification. Old vagrancy laws, like in Papa Christou v. Jacksonville, were struck down partly because they were so vague they allowed for arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement.
So what are some potential red flags someone might look out for? How might you recognize if you're being profiled?
It can be subtle, but red flags might include being stopped for a very unclear or trivial reason, noticing patterns in who gets stopped in your community, maybe the officer's language or demeanor seems based on assumptions, or seeing disparities in how different people in the same group are treated.
If you suspect that's happening, what should you do?
The advice is consistent. Remain calm and cooperative, but only within the bounds of asserting your rights. Don't consent to searches you don't have to. Crucially, document everything afterwards, the details of the stop, the officer's information if you can get it, exactly what was said and done. Then, consider filing a formal complaint with the police department's internal affairs or a civilian oversight board. And definitely seek legal counsel.
Okay, so if you believe any of your rights have been violated, not just profiling, what's the most powerful first step you can take?
Documentation. Absolutely, unequivocally documentation.
What specifically should you try to record?
As much detail as possible. The date, the exact time, the specific location, officer names and badge numbers if you can get them, or at least descriptions. Try to recall the exact statements made both by the officer and by you. Note down all the actions taken, record your responses, and document any injuries, even emotional distress that resulted from the encounter.
How can you capture all that?
Video or audio recording is powerful. Just remember to check your state's laws on consent first. There are even apps, like the ACLU's Mobile Justice app, designed for this. Get contact information for any witnesses. And even just jotting down quick notes as soon as possible afterwards can make a huge difference later on. Memory fades fast.
And once you have that documentation, what's the next critical step?
Seeking legal counsel.
Why is that so important?
Well, a lawyer can give you objective advice based on the law, not just emotion. They can help you navigate any potential criminal charges that might have resulted. They understand the specific nuances of local laws and procedures. They can tell you if you have a valid legal claim.
How do you find the right lawyer for something like this?
Look for lawyers who specialize in civil rights litigation or criminal defense. You can research online, ask for referrals. Also, organizations like the ACLU, the National Lawyers Guild, NLG, local legal aid societies, or even the Public Defender's Office if you're facing charges, can often provide assistance or point you in the right direction.
And what can a lawyer actually do for you?
They can help you file formal complaints against the officers or the department. They might be able to file a civil rights lawsuit, often under a federal law called Section 1983, seeking damages for the violation. They handle all the complex legal procedures like discovery, where they gather evidence, and they can negotiate potential settlements or represent you in court if necessary. Outro.
So, wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you listening right now? Bill Vincent's guide really drives home this point. Knowing your rights is genuinely your most powerful tool. It really is. It's about equipping yourself with the confidence, the dignity, and, crucially, the legal awareness to make informed decisions in those moments that can feel, well, pretty overwhelming.
And it's important to remember, this knowledge isn't just for protecting yourself. It's really a communal asset. The guide strongly encourages discussing these topics with your loved ones, especially maybe young people, immigrants, folks in marginalized communities who might be more vulnerable to legal misunderstandings or intimidation.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Supporting advocacy groups working on these issues, pushing for policy reforms in your community, these are all vital ways to kind of extend this empowerment beyond just ourselves.
That leads to a final thought. An informed society is truly a strong society. Your knowledge, the knowledge you gain from resources like this, it really can change the world, starting with how you navigate it yourself and then spreading that understanding to those around you.
Well said.
So, one last time to dive even deeper into this absolutely essential guide, grab your copy of Bill Vincent's Know Your Rights, A Citizen's Guide to Lawful Encounters. It's available on Amazon, and the link is right there in the description for this deep dive.
Thank you for listening to the Deep Dive Podcast.